Good to go? Recording?
Hello everybody and welcome to the War Room. This one is for this weekend's main event, the heavyweight clash between Alistair Overeem and Alexander Volkov. Okay, so obviously Alistair Overeem has got a massive amount of experience in mixed martial arts as well as kickboxing. So his record as it stands on UFC stats is 47, 18 and 1 no contest. But the thing I love about it is that his average fight time is just over 7 minutes. So the fact that he's been around a long time, the fact that he's fought a lot of guys, part of the reason for his longevity is because he's starching people. The other thing that's interesting is that we share a birthday. He was 2 when I was born. And believe it or not, he was born in Hounslow. Did you know that? Anyway, that's in England, so that's relevant for people that are watching in the UK. I just thought it was strange that he was born in Hounslow. Anyway, Volkov, on the other hand, 32 and 8, so still 40 fights into his pro career. Average fight time is over 15 minutes. Part of the reason for that is because he was a champion in other organizations and he's had 5-round fights and he's kind of he's a well-paced fighter, let's put it that way. As far as height-wise, Volkov is slightly taller at 6'7". The thing I like about Volkov is the fact that he fights like a tall fighter. And you can see that when he fought Stefan Struve. Struve has always been one of those fighters that you think at 7 foot tall, you should be able to keep everybody on the end of your jab. But in that fight, he got backed up, and Volkov actually looked like the taller fighter. So he uses his reach and his technical ability as well, coupled with his reach. They've both got the same reach, 80 inches. But obviously, height does play into a factor when it comes to this, especially with leg length. And Volkov does use a lot of kicks in his game, especially front kicks, and that knee coming to the center as well is going to be a very useful tactic for him. Okay, let me just get into some of the technical stuff. So if you go back further into Volkov's career, you'll find the same guy that you see in the octagon now. He's maybe a little bit less polished. He's got a few less skills in his arsenal, maybe some holes in his defense. But fundamentally, he's still the same guy. He's a good Thai boxer with good takedown defense a good kickboxer with good takedown defense and threats on the ground as well. But he knows who he is. He knows what he's good at. And Volkov has built his career based on the fighter that he is. With Overeem, and this makes sense given the fact that he's got so much experience and has had so many fights, you can find Overeem from, like the late 90s and the early 2000s, and then around 2010, and then 5 years ago, and then right now, he's a different fighter every time. I mean, he was a good Dutch kickboxer, that started to have a lot of success in MMA with his striking skills. Then he added the guillotine to his game and started winning in Abu Dhabi combat championships at a combat club. So the guillotines coupled with his striking made him a very formidable person in MMA, and he started running through guys with guillotines. The Overeem that we've got in the UFC, though, is a different version again. And I would even say that the version that we've got now is a different version to the one that stepped into the UFC. And the thing that you have to respect about Overeem is the fact that he does change his game. He does add things to it. If something's not worked, if something in his game's been exposed, then he'll not only try and fill that gap and make himself a better fighter, but it will oftentimes go and train with the person. Like Curtis Blades, for example, took him down, out-wrestled him, stopped him with ground and pound. The next thing that Overeem does is packs up and he moves to Blades' gym to work with him. So that mentality has kept him moving and kept him evolving. But it's also added loads and loads of skills to his game, which, some of the older ones that he used to use, you just don't see them at all anymore. I think the uncertainty of which Overeem you're going to face is a benefit in this fight, because Overeem knows what he's dealing with in Volkov. He's dealing with a long-range Thai boxer that likes to keep people at a distance but control the center, force them up against the fence where he can basically pick them off without him being touched a great deal, and work a variety of shots that are going to slowly dismantle people. He's not a devastating knockout puncher. He doesn't have a vicious knee attack. He doesn't, he's not cutting people to ribbons with elbows. It's a consistently paced beatdown that you get from this guy who's, he obviously hits hard because he's a heavyweight. By comparison to some of the other guys, maybe not so much. But the fact that he's got quite a watertight game makes him quite a difficult individual to deal with, as well as his physical attributes. Overeem coming into this one has got several different options, though. I mean, he can play the Thai boxing game if he wants. You know, he can kickbox with him, and he can utilize his footwork and his speed and his athleticism. There's definitely a benefit to Overeem's punching power that we could see in this fight if he starts to land cleanly. But he can also play the long game. You know, I mean, sometimes he's paid for playing the long game, getting caught in the last few seconds, but he's very good at controlling fights. He's very good at fighting to win. And when I say fighting to win, the fight that pops up in my mind was when he faced JDS, because it was a risky fight. You know, he's fighting another boxer in the heavyweight division that we know's got heavy hands, that is quite willing to get into a boxing match with anybody. And Overeem forced him to work that first round to the point where he was getting frustrated, and then caught him. You know, it's like he plays to win. He doesn't play to fight, and that comes with experience. And Volkov's not the kind of guy that comes to fight either. He comes to win as well. So we've got two technical strikers with lots of experience. Going to try and see which skill set works the best. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Overeem work takedowns. I won't be surprised if we see Overeem try and fold Volkov up against the fence where his long limbs start to become uncomfortable, and then starts chipping away at him with those elbows. That's where Overeem can be very imposing when he gets his hands on someone. He's also excellent in the clinch as well. So the real main risk for Overeem here is doing that kind of, like, this is what he was doing against JDS, and he's done it a few times. He kind of does this like where he kind of backs up and he keeps switching stances, and he doesn't get people attacking him because they're not exactly sure what he's doing. Like, it makes people a little bit unnerved because it's an uncharacteristic approach. Like the old Alistair Overeem that came out with the hammer, with the Demolition Man hammer and the orange Muay Thai shorts, and he had the same haircut as Stipe did when he was at high school. Like, he was a Thai boxer. You knew what you were getting from him. Like, his techniques followed regular movement patterns. You knew that the knee was coming up the center. You knew he had good body kicks and good low kicks, but he moved in a way that's formulaic, so it's predictable. That's what you've got with Volkov. He's the same kind of fighter. He's very good. It's a very high level formula, but it's still a formula that can be understood and predicted to an extent. When Overeem starts using this weird footwork where he's kind of leaning back on his back leg and he's giving these weird postures, if you're a high level striker like Volkov, you're going to look at that and think, I kind of don't know what's coming, so I'm not going to engage him just now. So the unpredictability of Overeem's approach is going to benefit him in the long run, because it will maybe hold Volkov, back with hesitation. It's a 25-minute fight. The stats say that that's probably going to favor Volkov because he's got, his longer average fight time. He'll be able to chip away at Overeem steadily. But then at the same time, Overeem's got so much experience fighting these longer fights and knows how to win, that if he doesn't feel like the fight's winnable in the first round, he'll take the round off. He'll cruise, he'll back up. He won't give the round away, obviously, but he'll certainly make his opponent work for it. But the key is the takedowns and the ground and pound. Like, that's the most recent version that we've seen of Overeem. Like the Sergey Pavlovich fight, for example, and then against Walt Harris and Sakai. Fights where he was up against guys that were dangerous strikers, that were active and agile strikers that could cause him some problems. So instead of waiting and hanging out on the outside like he did with JDS, he engaged them. He took them down. He forced them to fight in a range that wasn't comfortable for him. And I think that if I'm Overeem looking at Volkov, I'm thinking to myself, the best way to deal with this, at least in the early rounds, is to fold him up against the fence and try and elbow some cuts into his face to, try and discourage him over the distance. What else haven't I mentioned? Let me just have a quick look at the stats, because the stats speak to exactly what I'm saying. Like, Overeem's strikes landed per minute is 3.71. Volkov's is 4.76. So there's a clear output advantage for Volkov, even though his fight time is longer. The striking accuracy, slightly higher for Overeem, but that means that he's throwing less and still landing a decent amount. So he's not wasting stuff. Like I said, he's a well-paced, he's a well-disciplined and very experienced fighter. And all this comes into play. Like, the more experienced you've got, the more polished you are as a striker, the less you have to throw and have the same success as someone that's thrown a lot more and having, for example, Volkov's got nearly 5 strikes per minute, but he's landing less of them. So if you look at that comparatively, they might have the same output of successful strikes. So you can't always read too far into these. You have to look between the lines when it comes to understanding stats. Strikes absorbed per minute, slightly higher for Volkov, but that's because Overeem's very difficult to trap and pin down. And striking defense, slightly higher for Overeem, as you would expect. As far as takedowns, though, I mean, there we are. Average takedown per 15 minutes is 1.44 for Overeem, but that's jumped up in the last few years. Like he's never been really much of a grappler per se. He had a good guillotine, which was the discouragement for other people trying to grapple with him that were already trying to get away from his striking. So he's not coming in there in this with a grappling pedigree. It's a relatively new skill that he's added to his game, in my opinion, especially at this level. And that shows an open-mindedness. So how do I wrap this up? Like, if I'm Volkov and I know I'm fighting Overeem, I'm going to use my long-range weapons and try and stay as safe as possible. The last thing I want is one of those big overhands to crack me across the jaw and put me on the canvas, because then that takes the takedown effort away, and that puts Overeem in top position where he's working that ground and pound and the good wrestling that he's got. He's got to defend takedowns against Overeem at some point, because I just think that it's the safest route for Overeem to go to work his grappling a bit, and I think that it would be the smart thing for Volkov to stay against the fence, so he's not getting double legged in the center. I think his takedown defense against the fence is better, especially given the fact that he's so tall. You know, if you've got a tall individual, most wrestlers would look at a tall individual and think they're much easier to take down because there's more leg. You know, they have to lower their level much quicker than I do in order to meet me and stop my takedown. But tall fighters against the fence are a nightmare to take down, because it's literally like trying to take a table down. Like, a leg always gets to the floor. So there's a benefit in Volkov not trying to control the center in this one. I think it's going to be a very technical striking match, but I do feel like Overeem's coming in here with much more of an MMA skill set. And the uncertainty of which skill set he's going to bring to the table. You know, is he going to be a kickboxer with good clinch? Is he going to start attacking next? Is he going to ground and pound him? There's lots and lots of versions of Overeem for Volkov to figure out in those first rounds. Whereas Overeem is going to look at Volkov and see that gradual progression of the same kind of fighter and find ways in to hurt him. But, you know, Volkov's stoppage over Walt Harris just shows how debilitating a clean kick to the midsection can be. And no matter how good and how experienced you are, you can always get caught with that one shot that changes the fight. And this is heavyweight, so I'm going to sit right on the fence with this one. But it's going to be a hell of a fight. It's a great main event. 2 veterans throwing down, and big implications for the heavyweight division. Enjoy the fights. See you next time.